I recently came across this image after a 4-day animated Star Wars binge in preparation for both the new season of Clone Wars and Resistance, and I felt compelled to express some thoughts on the subject. This is of course hardly new criticism. Star Wars fans have been saying this kind of thing pretty much since Rebels was first released in 2014, but as someone who enjoyed both series equally, I could not in good conscience leave this standing without at least attempting to refute it. Spoilers abound ahead. You have been warned. First off, I must admit that I can happily concede that a couple of the points raised in the above image are completely valid, but most are exaggerated, outright incorrect, or simply expecting far too much from a cartoon aimed primarily at an audience of children, a younger audience than the Clone Wars, in my opinion, so I will go through them one at a time. The Virgin Star Wars Rebels. 1. Uneasy about violence. 9 times out of 10 they only knock out stormtroopers. Yes, there is significantly less murder of stormtroopers in Rebels than there were droids in Clone Wars, but duh, stormtroopers are people, and this is post The Force Awakens where one of the main characters is an incredibly sympathetic ex-stormtrooper, and whilst I'm totally on board with killing space Nazis, Saw Gerrera was right all along. Save the rebellion! Save the dream! You can't really have the heroes of the story literally fucking murdering foot soldiers every episode, whereas you can just kill droids left, right and centre. Plus, the rebels do actually suffer heavy losses, which makes sense considering how hilariously outmatched they are by the Empire. 2. Debuted gimmicky weapons like spinning lightsabers and wrist slingshots, purely for the toys. I see the point about the gimmicky toys, but this is just a part of Star Wars in general. Darth Maul introduced double sabers and Kylo Ren introduced the crossguard. Every new Star Wars property introduces gimmicky stuff for toys. 3. Horrible art style makes the episodes look poorly animated and cheap. The art style is different and takes some getting used to, but that's only to be expected when the budget is significantly lower than the Clone Wars. 4. Empire is a fucking joke. Everyone from stormtroopers to moths are highly incompetent. Of course the Empire is incompetent. The whole premise of the show is that the main cast has to somehow survive rebelling against them every episode. If they were competent, it would be a really short show, with the main cast not even surviving beyond the pilot. Also, stormtroopers being incompetent has literally been a thing since 1977. 5. Was literally so bad, Clone Wars characters were brought in to spark interest. Rebels is a continuation. The reason so many characters came back, which started all the way back in season 1 by the way, so it was clearly planned from the beginning, was because many character stories ended on cliffhangers due to the cancellation, and Rebels nicely concludes and continues them. And this is likely to continue through to Resistance, which is likely to continue plot threads left unsolved in Rebels, like what happened to Ezra and Thrawn, why the fuck Ahsoka didn't help the Rebels during the original trilogy, etc. If the show totally ignored them, that would create huge plot holes when it comes to the original trilogy, not to mention the massive fan backlash in response to the unresolved plot and character threads. It would be like saying, The Empire Strikes Back is so unoriginal, it has to use characters from A New Hope, or Clone Wars was so bad it needed to use characters from Rogue One, both of which would be ridiculous to try and seriously attempt to argue. 6. Characters are one-dimensional and bland stereotypes. I disagree about most of the characters, but yeah, Ezra is really just the worst. The Chad, Star Wars, The Clone Wars. 1. An episode wouldn't go by without a decapitation or other gruesome method of death. The comparatively high level of violence in Clone Wars was, as mentioned previously, partly due to the robotic nature of the droids, but also because it was an actual two-sided war rather than the Empire versus about 50 people. There are actual battles in Clone Wars, whereas Rebels has to rely on stealth a lot of the time, much like the Rebellion does in the actual movies. I mean, the first shot of the first Star Wars movie is literally there to imply an enormous power imbalance between the Empire and the Rebels. 2. Matured over time along with its audience. Rebels also matured over time, but it was aimed for a younger audience than the Clone Wars to begin with, so this one doesn't really hold much water. 3. High quality art style. Literally every episode cost around $1 million. I totally agree that Clone Wars was absolutely stunningly beautiful at times, but that came at a cost, and its huge budget contributed to a lot of its production issues and multiple cancellations. 4. Battle droids are occasionally used for comic relief, but Confederacy as a whole is still a threatening enemy because of competent leaders. The generals in the Clone Wars ended up looking just as incompetent due to the exact same issues. The good guys had to win, and so the generals, Grievous and Ventress included, ended up suffering from the exact same problems as Tarkin and Thrawn do in Rebels. 5. Had the balls to bring back Darth fucking Maul and made it work. I will insist from now until the heat death of the universe that Darth Maul is the absolute best part of the Star Wars universe for me thanks to these two cartoons, though the above argument still makes no sense. 6. Knew from memory how to draw Rex because I've watched so much of the show. Rex is a much better and much better designed character than Ezra, who, as I've already mentioned, I do not like, but he is also in Rebels, and he has a great old man clone design, which I absolutely love. 7. Had dozens of genetically identical characters and managed to give them each a distinct and fleshed out personality. A few clones had distinct personalities, and by that I mean like 5 at most, not counting characters like 99 and Boba who have totally different designs or one-shot clone characters. Conclusion. Both Star Wars Rebels and Star Wars The Clone Wars were absolutely fantastic series, although both have the odd dud episode or character, and any hardcore fans of Star Wars should check them both out. My recommendation is to ignore memes like this made by people who grew up as fans of The Clone Wars and may feel that Rebels doesn't measure up. There is a lot of valid criticism of and discussion to be had about all aspects of the Star Wars universe. These two fantastic series perhaps more than most, considering the vast amount of lore they impart or expand upon. This may or may not be the last time I talk about either of these shows, and most certainly not the last time I mention the Star Wars as a whole.